Subject this morning is an interesting one: common sense and mysticism. It has two aspects. On one aspect, common sense and mysticism are poles apart, almost diametrically opposite. In the other sense, they are the same thing. In the common sense that common sense is often used, it is the sense in which they are poles apart. Common sense, the way most people consider common sense, is a means of sort of dragging down the inspiration and the spirit of man to the level of paying the grocery bills. Common sense is that which causes many people to, when they see someone who is perhaps inspired by some beautiful thought, to try to bring him down with some cynical remark, some worldly comment, some reminder that he hasn't bought the meat for the supper yet, and all kinds of things like this. This kind of attitude is, mind you, every attitude has its own place. Every attitude can be right depending on its context, depending on its purpose. And there is surely a good purpose in remembering the everyday facts of life. The trouble with common sense, as it is usually used, is that it is all too common. It leaves out of consideration the great inspirations, the great truths, and hopes and ideals that have been the real cause of building civilization down through the ages. So men of common sense, of the common type of common sense, are those who like to think it is they who keep the machines running. Possibly it is, but it is not they who build the machines. Again and again, the people who have built the machines, that is to say, the people who have set new ideas into motion, the people who have started some new movement in civilization, again and again, these people are people who have been rather uncommon in their viewpoints. Been people who again and again have been told by men of common sense, it won't work, it can't happen, it can't be done. You know the expression, they laughed at Fulton. Well, it is a matter of common experience down through history that they will always laugh at those people who have the high ideas, high ideals, and who set out to make their dreams come true. Remember, although the present may belong to the man of common sense, the future belongs to the man of dreams. It is seldom that dreams can be put into effect right now, but it is only because of dreams that man has lifted himself out of the level of savagery and has been able to compose great plays, to build great governments, to write beautiful poems and symphonies, to evolve high philosophies. All of these things are made possible only because a few people have dared not to have just plain common sense, but to think higher than the common level. Actually, there is something in the heart of man that longs for something more than the common level, that longs for inspiration. It's not enough for us to go through life just paying our grocery bills. We want to find beauty. We want to find love. It's a hunger in all hearts to know these things. Joy, peace, love, and inspiration are instinctive demands of the human heart, and nobody's going to be happy until he has them. But the trouble is with common sense, in the way that we are discussing it now, common sense, is that usually it implies a certain feeling of, well, these things can't be done, these things can't be known, these things can't be felt. And it is rather a means of killing all that is higher in man and saying that the true way is just to be as dull as possible. It is the way of, unfortunately, very many people in the world. It is the way of saying that there is no hope in trying to rise. It's all a matter of idle dreams. I tried it once, perhaps when he was 3 years old or something. Anyway, I tried it once, and it didn't work, and so now I realize that the only sane way to live is just to do my job, make money, pay my bills, get new things for the apartment possibly, and get a good night's sleep. And it all sounds very sound and very reasonable. But do you know why it sounds reasonable? Here we come to the crux of the matter. Surely there is a good point in the whole idea of keeping your feet on the ground. Surely people who don't have their feet on the ground are, if they're not realistic in matters of normal experience, how can we be sure that they are realistic in matters of unnormal, I don't want to say abnormal, unnormal experience? How can we be sure? We can't. If they aren't clear in their own minds on the level of things that they actually know, how can they be sure that they are clear on things that they don't know? And yet things can be known that are not normally seen. You know, there's a story about my teacher one time in New York. Somebody was saying to him, oh, he always went into cosmic consciousness. It was very easy for him to go into samadhi and so on. And so Yogananda saw from his expression and everything, I mean, you know, businessmen know other businessmen, saints know other saints. He knew this man wasn't in that state. And so he said, well, I'd like to see you come to my room and go into this state. He knew he couldn't argue him out of it, but he thought maybe he could show him something. So the man went up there and he sat down in samadhi and was fidgeting and breath heaving and so on. You can't go into samadhi as long as you have a restless body. And so finally he could stand the suspense no longer. He said, why don't you ask me where I am? Well, Yogananda said, where are you? On top of the dome of the Taj Mahal. Well, Yogananda said, there must be something the matter with your own dome. I see you sitting right here. And then the man said, all right, test me again. So Yogananda said, well, if you can go to the Taj Mahal over in India, why don't you go downstairs and tell me what you see in the restaurant? So the man said, fine. And he went downstairs, so he thought in his spirit, and he said that, well, he described it as the piano over here next to the door, and a potted fern, and a couple of people had sat down next to the door, and he described a few things. Well, Yogananda had this power, and this is what I'm getting to, that such things are not necessarily just dreams. Any great master can see such things. And he said, no, that's not so. He described the room. Then he described who had just come in and who was sitting where. And they went downstairs, and they saw that this man had been wrong, and Yogananda had been right. Then this man could tell that he had been laboring under a delusion. The trouble with most visionaries, whether mystical visionaries or other types of visionaries, philosophers, theologians, dreamers of all sorts, is that they prefer to dream about things that are far away from their actual experience and far away from any possibility of verification. And of course it all looks very beautiful, and because it's so beautiful I think it has to be true. Common sense in this way has a very sound thing to say to mysticism of that branch. It says that if you can't live straight right here, how do you know that you're going to live straight up there where you aren't even yet anyway? If you can't see things clearly here, how do you expect to see things clearly at a distance? If you're so nearsighted that you can hardly read a page in front of your eyes, how do you expect to be able to read a sign at a distance of a mile? This is the idea of common sense, and this is the validity in even the usual common sense of people who try to bring your mind down to a dull level of daily reality. This is the only reality they know, and they think this is the only reality worth knowing. And basically speaking, there is a wholesome thought there. This is why they feel justified in their ideas. At the same time, this kind of common sense is really too common, too pedestrian to make a man what man ought to be. More than an animal, something with a spirit inside, a man of understanding, a man of inspiration, a man of happiness. This kind of attitude doesn't give these things. Rather, it has a means of gradually killing that spirit in man that reaches out for the higher things in life. Now, how are we going to apply common sense to a more mystical outlook on life? First of all, we have to realize that common sense, in the way that is valid, is really the most uncommon kind of sense possible. Very few people are interested in verifying their truth, their ideas, by experience. Their common sense is just a matter of the more common, the more usual, the more commonplace, and the more universal, in the sense that my neighbors think this way, their neighbors think this way, everybody in this town thinks this way, therefore it must be true, I'll think this way. This is the kind of commonness that is usually associated with common sense. Common sense in the sense that I will take my ideas from everybody else, I will take my ideas from society, I will take my ideas from the culture I live in, and this is my reality. No, this kind of common sense is not based on experience at all. It is rather a refusal to examine your experience of life and to think whether it is true for you, whether you have found by your experience that it's valid. It isn't based on that at all. Again and again, as Emerson put it in his essay on self-reliance, which is a really excellent essay, he said that how many times in a man's life he is timid to express an idea because it's his own, and then he has to accept it from somebody else as belonging to somebody else, just because he didn't first admit to himself that it was true, because on the basis of the testimony of his own experience. We must learn, if we are going to get anywhere in the path of reality, to face reality from the standpoint of our understanding, from the standpoint above all of our experience. And this is the kind of common sense that I am talking about specifically today as being valid. We have to see, we have to have that kind of vision that will look at truth straight in the face. That will look at life straight in the face and say, are you true or are you false? This kind of realism is necessary on the spiritual path. It is necessary in mysticism. Without it, there is not true mysticism. Saint Teresa of Avila, one of the great Catholic mystics, wrote that the chief criterion for accepting nuns into her order should be that they have sound common sense. The reason being that on the mystical path, as on the poetic path and various other paths that deal more with experiences that are beyond the normal experience of man, most people in this tend to get their feet quite off the ground, to be off in the clouds somewhere. You talk to many people on the mystical path, on the spiritual path, and you'll find them accepting wholesale all sorts of things that applied to a level of common daily experience simply don't make sense at all. They're absurd. Now, it's easy to believe, many people will accept anything they read. They say it's published, therefore it has to be true. This is not a valid idea. We have to have the straightness of thinking to relate every truth to our experience of life. Even the highest experience, the highest truth that a saint can teach or that a scripture can teach has to be related to the experience that we have right now. It may not be a high experience. We may be personally on a very low level of spiritual understanding, and yet to the extent that we experience anything on that level, that is our understanding, and it's only on the basis of that understanding that we can hope to proceed any farther on the path. Do you know what love is? You may say, oh, I don't know anything about love in the sense that the saints talk, love of the Spirit and so on, but I do know what love of my wife is, or love of my children is. All right, start with that. Start with that and understand any truth that you have beyond that in relation to this experience that you have right now. This is one of the marvelous aspects of the Hindu teaching, that they don't try to give an absolute philosophy to everybody, universal for all men, no. They say that there are many levels of understanding, and whatever truth a person is given must be related to the experience that he has. For example, there was a woman who came to Ramakrishna who said that I can't understand all this business of God and all these abstract thoughts that you're teaching me. I just love my child and love to take care of him. Well, Ramakrishna said, fine, because God is in your child too. So love your child as if God were in him. Feel that it's God that you are loving in your child, and serve God in that sense. Well, she did. And she developed tremendous devotion. She began to think that this God whom I've limited to this little form is something much greater, something that I can love in other children too. And from learning to love other children, gradually she began to love other people in general. And from loving people, she began to feel that, well, this same God is in the flowers, the same God is in the stars, the same God is in the whole universe. And so she began loving the whole world as God. Then she thought, well, all of these are only his forms. How much more wonderful must he be? And she began loving that experience that she was feeling in these things rather than the things themselves. In the path of mysticism, the true path, we always must start where we are right now. This was the great argument that Buddha had with the people of his time. They were using all sorts of philosophical ideas and not relating them to man's needs. And Buddha said, forget all these ideas of all these high-flowing ideas and so on. Think right now where you are. You know that you experience a certain amount of pain in your life. You know that what you want is happiness, but on the other hand, you don't want a happiness that is temporary. You want something that will endure, and you won't find it in the sense objects of the world around you. Therefore, he taught them to seek their happiness in something higher. Seek their happiness in that where it would endure. He had tried it out. He found that it could be found in himself, in the spirit. And this was the experience, therefore, that he taught to other people. Wherever you are right now, whatever your understanding is of life at this particular moment, this is the level from which you must begin. And remember that you must see everything in relation to that experience. This is the first and greatest rule of all commonsensical living and of all mystical living. And here is the only difference between common sense in the usual way that it's thought of and mysticism. That most people limit their experience to just the experiences of their bodies and don't look any higher. And actually, this is a very illogical, and uncommonsensical way to approach life. Because a person who thinks that he is going to find what he wants, is going to accomplish what he is seeking through common sense, the person who thinks that he is going to accomplish these things only by a logical kind of existence is going to find himself cheated. You don't find the things that you are seeking in the senses. You don't find satisfaction or fulfillment in the senses. You can't. You never will. And this is where common sense in the usual way falls flat. It's a means of persuading yourself to mediocrity. It's a means of saying that what I want is just what I see in front of my nose, instead of thinking that from what is in front of my nose, perhaps there's something behind it, beyond it. The man of adventure is not necessarily a man who lacks common sense. He is a man who uses common sense to lead him toward realities, however, not toward imagination. Here is what one has to have, a very honest attitude. And a very honest attitude is going very quickly to persuade you that life is more than bread and meat and sleeping and a little bit of amusement. It's very quickly going to persuade you that what you are really doing in seeking these things is kidding yourself. You are running away from yourself. People who seek diversion are really only trying to divert themselves from themselves. People who seek escape are only seeking escape from themselves. But actually, common sense is a kind of escape too. A kind of clinging to this little straw of mundane reality for fear of turning loose and swimming in the great tides of life. It takes a certain amount of heroism to swim in those tides. It takes a certain amount of courage to turn loose of little things in order to seek big things that are perhaps beyond our grasp. Yes, it takes courage. And really common sense in the usual way is a form of cowardice, not of realism. Anybody who has a realistic outlook on life is going to see very squarely and fairly that he's been cheating himself of those things that he really wanted. He wanted love. He's not getting love in a little compromising finding with one or two human beings. Love wants to expand. He's only burying his head in the sand when he thinks this is enough. He wants happiness. He's not going to find happiness, never has found happiness in just the little things of life, because happiness itself, the very nature of happiness is to want more and more, to try to expand. Common sense rather tries to build a fence around oneself and to say, this is my enclosure, this is my universe, I'm not going to step beyond it, I'm going to pretend there is nothing beyond this fence. I'm going to be satisfied right here in this little tiny self-made prison of mine. This is cowardice. This is not a straightforward view of reality at all. But if you use common sense in a realistic way, then you will come to see that it leads you towards greater and greater visions, greater and greater unfoldment of experience, of life, and real common sense. True, straightforward thinking cannot but ultimately lead you towards mysticism. It cannot. A man is starving himself if he doesn't seek wisdom. It's not enough. I know somebody said to me one time, I was talking about these things, and I said, well, after all, we're more than animals. He said, no, that's all we are, animals. He belonged to that old-fashioned scientific school, or perhaps not old-fashioned, I don't know, but anyway. I said, well, speak for yourself. If he wants to be an animal, let him, but I'm not going to be just an animal. The thing is that I can take this humanity and use it to become a full human being. If it isn't anything more than a human being, at least let me look to the heights and not look back where I came from. A man is climbing up a hill and is satisfied to look back and think, oh, I've come so far. Let me sit down and rest. All right, but he'll probably go up just 10 feet or so. The man who wants to climb the mountaintop isn't going to be looking back. He knows it's dangerous, in fact, to look back because he might slip. He's always going to look up and up and up. And every time he thinks he's reaching the top, he comes to that little rise and he sees it's just a bit of the mountain that he saw before him, but that the top is farther up, and he goes farther up and he comes to another rise, but the top is still farther up, and so on. He keeps going upwards because that is where his mind is. This is why I say, let's not think of ourselves as animals. Surely we are animals in a sense, but let us concentrate on the reality that we hope to attain. Whether we believe in God or not, whether we believe in reality or not, we all believe in love. We all believe in joy. We all believe in understanding. And we cannot find satisfaction so long as we think that bread is all we want, money is all we want, sex is all we want. These things are just the most basic things of life, the most primitive things of life, and man is never going to be happy with these things. He is only going to be happy when he goes beyond and seeks something more. Human love, there is a beautiful poem of Mirabai, one of the great saints of India. She said, other women's sweethearts, when they go to other countries, spend all their time writing letters to them. But my love lives in my heart, and so I cannot but chant his name day and night. He is always with me. This, too, is a kind of fulfillment of love. To have a love that is always with you, isn't that much sweeter than that pain of separation, that pain of parting? This kind of love that is there in your heart all the time, that is a real thing, not just an imagination, an experience, a being. This is something real. This is a part of the mystical experience. And again, joy. People are always thinking, well, I'll have happiness when I get that new car that I've been looking for. I'll have happiness when finally I get that new sofa and can get rid of this old mousetrap. I'll have happiness when I can get this beautiful cottage by the sea with roses growing up on a trellis. Then I'll be happy. But happiness is always like that man who made a dog pull a cart by tying a sausage on the end of a stick to his head, and the dog kept straining after the sausage, and while he strained after the sausage, he didn't reach it, but he did pull the cart. So likewise, people strain after the sausage of happiness, but all they do is pull behind them a cartload of worry. Always looking for happiness in the future, getting it every now and then. Oh, it's so nice for a day, for a week, then finally you're used to it, you're looking for something else. This kind of happiness is a will-o'-the-wisp. What happiness we want is an experience that we can carry with us all the time. A portable paradise inside. This is something that all men are seeking. Peace. You don't want peace, just the kind of peace that you feel sometimes when the children stop shouting and fighting for a while and the rock and roll music's turned off and the TV isn't working and finally you can go back, lie on your bed and say, oh, how peaceful it is. You say it for a second or two before you fall asleep. This is a negative kind of peace, and it's very sporadic. It doesn't happen very often. The kind of peace we want is something that is dynamic, something that we can carry with us all the time. Yes, these are things that we want, and that is why anybody with a straightforward view of life is going to say sooner or later that I haven't got what I've been looking for. I've got things. I haven't got the thing that I wanted from those things. I've got people, but I haven't got the thing that I wanted from those people. I've only got little glimpses of it. It's as if I had been looking at life through a fence, a bamboo fence. Every now and then I can see a chink in the fence and I can see into the fields beyond, but again, it closes up. It's only little chinky visions. What I want is to get through that fence and see the field for itself and be able to roll in the grass and pick the flowers and breathe the free air. This is what we want, to get out of our little enclosures that we've been building for ourselves. All men sooner or later reach the point where they're tired of enclosing themselves in little boxes, in little fenced enclosures, and saying, this is what I want of life and no more, because I'm afraid of that great beyond. Just like the little bird that's been in a cage for 20 years, and you open the doors of the cage, it's afraid to come out because it's so used to its enclosure. But a little bit it hops out, then it comes back. A little bit further it hops out, then it comes back. After a while, it goes out, stays out, and realizes once again, as it knew in the beginning, that its true, normal way is to fly in the open air. Common sense, if it is honest, which is the only kind of common sense that is valid, is going to lead to mysticism inevitably. But as it does, remember that the kind of common sense that you need and the kind of mysticism that you need must be constantly based on this very straightforward thinking. People will come to you with all kinds of ideas. Relate them to what you know of life. Does it make sense in relation to your life? Does it make sense in relation to the experience that you've had of life? If it does, then tentatively accept it. But even then, don't accept it until you have experienced it yourself. Make your approach to reality always a question of experience. This is the funny thing. People's minds get so twisted with false thinking. Theology is a very unrealistic approach to religion because it is based entirely on dogma, entirely on thinking on your ideas of what somebody else's ideas are about somebody else's ideas about truth. The Bible isn't enough of an authority. The Bhagavad Gita isn't enough of an authority. The words of any great master are not enough of an authority for the simple reason that you can only understand as much as your experience and your understanding have prepared you to understand. That's why there are so many different interpretations of the scriptures. It's not enough to read and think, and yet theologians get this idea that it's quite enough. And the funny twist is that they will tell you that mysticism is, very far out. You're getting your feet off the ground. You should keep your feet solid on the ground and just think things through logically. Well, they're the ones with their feet off the ground. For the simple reason that they are thinking about all these high-flown ideas that have no relationship to experience. It only has relationship to what the church tells them they ought to be thinking, what the Bible seems to mean to them. This isn't realism. This isn't honesty of thought. It can get into all kinds of far-out imaginations, like that time in the history of the scholasticism in the medieval age in the church, when there were a lot of theologians arguing as to how many angels could dance on the head of a needle. A completely absurd thing to look for, and yet if one person starts a theory in that direction, the next person is going to go a little bit farther in that direction, and before you know it, everybody is sitting around pulling long faces and very seriously discussing, and it all seems like a very important thing to talk about just because everybody else is talking about it. This is the way most thinking is done. Everybody else thinks about it, therefore I'll think about it. Everybody else talks this way, therefore I'll talk this way. Actually, greatness comes from, first of all, standing away, just as a painter has to stand away from his picture to see it in true proportion. So a great man is going, to a certain extent, to stand away from the trends of thought of his day and age, from the way of thinking of other people around him, and he's going to ask himself, with everything that comes his way, is it true? But it's not enough to say, is it true, just theoretically. Is it true in relation to what I know? Can I relate it to my experience of life? If I can, then I can accept it. If you make your search for reality this kind of thing, then you will see that you will be able to go to greater and greater heights of reality. But if you don't, your mind will be up in the clouds all the time. You will not be able to relate even to this world, let alone to any higher world. Now, if you will read the lives of great saints, you will see again and again that they emphasize being able to keep your feet on the ground of this world too. Ramana Maharshi used to make it a very important thing that people make their beds, that people cook properly, that people do their duties of daily life not only as well as other people, but better than other people. Now you may say, but why? These things don't matter. If you're seeking reality and so on, they do matter. Because remember, if you want to see something across the road, you can use a very cheap pair of binoculars if you want to use anything, and it'll help you. If you want to see what's on a distant star, you've got to have a telescope that is ground very, very fine. The the mirrors that they have made for Mount Palomar, Mount Wilson, and so on, these 100 and 200-inch telescopic mirrors, they have to be so careful about how they grind them that they can't even let dust come in that room. They've got an air conditioning system that constantly takes dust out. One little scratch could completely ruin the whole thing. Now it's the same thing in our search for reality. Remember that the closer you get to these higher truths, the more you raise your sights to seek these realities that are beyond everyday experience, the more the telescope of your mind must be sharpened. It can't be dull. Vague thinking will never result in true insight. And one way to make it sharp is to constantly sharpen it on the daily experiences that surround you in your daily life. To be straightforward and realistic in everything that you do. Try to be efficient. Don't make efficiency your religion. A person can go much too far that way. Many people spend so much time cleaning their things and vacuuming and taking care of their homes, they have no time for high reading, for artistic pursuits, for meditation, for deep thinking. But keep your mind on the common things. Don't think that if you are seeking truth, therefore it's perfectly all right to be unkind to people or rude to people or critical. No, it's not. You should try to develop yourself in a human way too, for the simple reason that it will help you to develop yourself in a divine way. These things are not essential in themselves to the spiritual path. People have been able to get spiritual understanding and insight without them. But they will help. And the balanced path, which is the path taught by the Bhagavad Gita, this balanced path is that which will take you toward the ultimate reality in the highest and truest sense. In the Bhagavad Gita, there is a passage that describes the different kinds of joy that a person can experience. O chief of Bharatas, hear from me now the three kinds of joy. That in which one finds enjoyment only through practice, that is to say of bhajana, of singing, of meditation, of worship, and whereby one reaches the end of sorrow Nay, that which appears like poison in the beginning, but tastes as nectar in the end, born of the placidity of mind brought about by meditation on God, such a joy is said to be sattvic, ennobling. The joy which is derived from the contact of the senses with their objects, though appearing like nectar in the beginning, that is to say at the time of enjoyment, proves to be mischievous like poison in the end. That is why such joy is said to be rajasic, activating, that is to say, it leads to constant and renewed activities, but never to any cessation of activity in utter fulfillment and joy. The joy which deadens the soul both in the beginning and in the end, and which is derived from sleep, indolence, and carelessness, is said to be tamasic. Now, here is the funny twist to it, that as you examine, you may see, well, but people are very happy in this world. They are very happy when they are enjoying good food and so on. Meditation, I try. I don't get any enjoyment out of meditation. I find I get restless and dissatisfied with meditation. So you may say, well, on the basis of that kind of reasoning, give up meditation, give up high pursuits, give up these things that seem so unpalatable in the beginning, and just confine yourself to sense pleasures. But if you will have a very straightforward look at the thing, you will see that sense pleasures, although pleasurable in the beginning, don't give pleasure later on. They take pleasure away. And many times, if you will be honest with yourself, you will see that things that don't seem so worthwhile at the start, as you carry through, you find that they beget an attitude of mind that is its own reward. There is happiness in that very attitude and outlook of mind. Purity doesn't seem like much in the beginning, but a person who is pure finds that he is always at peace, always happy. Yes, this is true. And you can relate it to your experience in little ways. Try from day to day to examine yourself, to see what you have done today, and to see where it is leading you. Is it making you a fuller person, or is it making you a more limited person? Remember also to take advantage of the experience of other people. To see those who have followed a particular path for a long time and have got something out of it should give us hope that we too will get something out of it. And those who have followed this path for a long time and got nothing out of it should perhaps persuade us that if we follow it, it won't give us satisfaction. Common sense, therefore, means to use the experience of others, but above all to relate it to what you know right now. However, this is the point to consider, that although mysticism should be made a question of sound realism, although mysticism should be made a question of sound practice and relating to your own life, don't keep your mind on that level. Too many people in seeking reality get hung up on small realities at the expense of big ones. There is a passage in the Gita which is so beautiful at the end. This is another translation, but it's more poetic, and this happens to be a poetic passage. Nay, but once more take my last word, my utmost meaning have. Precious thou art to me, right well beloved. Listen, I tell thee for thy comfort this. Give me thy heart, adore me, serve me. Cling in faith and love and reverence to me. So shalt thou come to me, I promise true, for thou art sweet to me. The idea is, well, I haven't got that passage here, but he says elsewhere too, to leave all those duties and commandments and so on, and just fling yourself into God. Ultimately, what comes when a person has got himself squared away to where he has a very clear view that this is where I want to go. He knows it clearly, not just because it's a lovely vague thought and it seems so poetic and so on. In other words, he is seeking it not just with his mind, but with his whole being. There comes a time on the path when it is time to throw overboard all lesser things and just plunge into that, even if necessary to be a fanatic for it. It isn't true fanaticism, but that can only come when you have a certain clear vision. But that time must come. Don't think it's enough just to go plodding along on your way and to think that your life must always be like this. Try to get your mind squared away, try to get your vision of reality squared away to the point where you definitely see that this is the reality, where you definitely see that this is what you want, where you definitely understand this in relation to your daily life, and then go after it wholeheartedly. This is where mysticism begins to leave common sense behind. Because common sense is still just working with the mind, but we want to go beyond the mind. Common sense is still just trying to analyze and to discuss and to say, well, shall I go, shall I not go? So often we find that this kind of attitude, if it's carried too long, means never going at all. After having decided, after having weighed all the factors pro and con, you must go beyond this mind. You must go beyond reason. Reason is only meant to help to get us to go in the right direction. Reason is only meant to keep us going towards reality with a clear vision, but it is a limited aspect of our total view of life, which is based primarily not on reason but experience. Go beyond reason. Go beyond common sense. Yes, go beyond all that is common. Realize that ultimately your soul wants to be mad. Your soul wants to be mad with joy. Everybody loves a lover. Everybody loves one who is drunk with joy. Everybody loves somebody who has gone beyond this pedestrian plodding and suddenly seizes life at the roots and says, I will drink until I'm drunk with joy, and go on, continuing in that drunkenness. Yes, we want to be drunk with life, and all of us feel this sense in our heart. We always, this is one of the reasons people are so firm in their rejection of it, because somehow they persuaded themselves that it can't be found. They wouldn't reject it if it weren't so appealing. They wouldn't stand so firmly with their backs to that light if they weren't so attracted by it. It's something in the heart of all men. Everybody longs to find an inspiration that can seize his whole being and thrill him to the very core. Who wants to find a love that can completely transform the entire universe for his gaze. Everybody wants to. Trouble is, we find it so seldom. And usually we find it for such a short time in life that we are almost afraid of it. Yes, I think fear is at the heart of mysticism. Fear is at the heart of one's resistance to it, and not the common sense I talked about before. It is a fear of giving ourselves wholeheartedly to something. In a sense, it's like the fear of a lover who is afraid to express his love for fear that he'll be rejected. The fear of unrequited love of the universe. Unrequited love of life. This is, I think, at the heart of it, that I will plunge into that ocean and find that there is no shore on the opposite side. I will have left everything and find nothing in the end. This kind of fear is there in the beginning. But if a person, after having used his common sense, and after having weighed all the pros and cons, and after having had a very firm and realistic outlook on this thing, so that he doesn't just accept all kinds of goofy ideas that are given to him, but he says that I know that this is real. I've had enough experience of it to taste its reality. If then he throws everything overboard and says, I'm going for that, then that does take heroism, but it's the kind of heroism that is needed. You must transcend common sense. It's a hard truth. It really is. It's a very difficult thing to take, this thought that I must give myself wholly to something. And yet this world, which is so full of uncommitted humanity, at the same time is a world full of unfulfilled humanity. We all long to be able to find something to which we can commit ourselves wholly. And the only reason we don't do so is we haven't seen it, perhaps. More than that, however, we're afraid. Yes, the time comes, therefore, when, like that woman Ramakrishna told about, who she said, oh, I'm so grief-stricken I can hardly stand my life, and she threw herself on the ground to sob uncontrollably, but before she did so, she removed the ring from her nose that women wore there for fear of breaking it. This kind of madness is the kind of madness most people do. It's a calculated thing. I will give myself so much to God, provided He gives me so much in return. It's sort of a merchandising complex. Always thinking, well, how much should I give? How much do I have to give in order to get so much from Him, you know? This bartering, this bargaining with Him is the reason very few people get very far on the spiritual path. And they call this common sense. Well, common sense should lead them finally to the point that they give up this kind of common sense. And they say, all right, I have faith in you. I don't care. If you give me nothing, if you give me everything, I only love I don't love you for what you give me. I only love because I'm in love with love itself. I don't ask anything from you except the joy of loving you. This is the kind of thing that the devotee must have if he is going to have the height of spiritual experience. It's a matter of giving, not of taking. And this common sense will lead you to the door, but it won't take you through. You've got to take the rest on courage. On the frank realization that this is truly what you want. The time must come sooner or later when you're so sure that this is what you want that you won't be afraid any longer. How does it come? It comes by little things, not by big. Remember, everybody can be heroic in big deeds, but it's very few who can be heroic in little things. Learn to make God a part of your daily life. Learn to share your thoughts with him. Learn to be very honest. This is where common sense comes into the picture again. Learn to be very honest with him. That is to say, when you have any wrong thought, something that you're afraid of, don't tuck it back into the back of your mind and say, oh, this I don't want to share with God because it's unworthy. That's the very thing you should share with God. Don't let there be any nook in your heart that is hidden from him if you want him to come into your heart. Be very frank. If you feel no devotion, say, God, I don't feel any devotion for you, but still I know that I want peace. Whatever you want, frankly, proceed from there. If you feel angry with God, quarrel with him. He doesn't mind. He's a big person. Bigger than you and I suppose. He doesn't care about these things. All he really wants from us is strict honesty, and this is common sense, yes. But to go beyond this kind of honesty into love. Love is the greatest kind of honesty of all. To say, yes, there is nothing that I have to hide from you, because I know that anything that I give you will be safe in your hands. This is the kind of honesty. Honesty of joy, honesty of love. This is what mysticism implies. This is how mysticism flies so far above the run-of-the-mill experience of man. There is no fulfillment in life that does not include the mystical experience. No matter what kind of fulfillment you've had, it has not been a fulfillment without some little touch of this mystical experience. Because you will never be able to enjoy anything in the world except as you have that capacity to enjoy inside yourself. It is yourself that you have to develop. It is yourself that you have to fulfill. It is only as you have peace in yourself that you can find peace outside. It's only as you have joy in yourself that you can find joy outside. It's only as you have love in yourself that you can find love in other people. All of these things, first of all, become a personal document. Self-fulfillment is the prerequisite for fulfillment in anything else in life. And therefore, mysticism is actually the core of reality, the core of common sense, and the very foundation from which every other kind of common sense should proceed. Make meditation a part of your life. Spend a little bit of time every day in sharing your thoughts with God and your feelings and perceptions with God, or your own higher self, whatever you like to call it. But get within yourself. Find this peace. Take very definite, resolute steps relating everything that you read, everything that you think, to your daily experience. Don't be thinking about what's happening on Mars and all these things. Flying saucers and so on are so unnecessary compared to how you are going to find happiness in your own heart. This is the common sense part of it. But then go on and go deeper. And finally you will find that your whole life becomes filled with this divine experience. This is what the great mystics have come to tell us. As Jesus said, I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. This is all that mysticism implies. It's not something mysterious. It is life. It is your own self. It is the reality of your own being. God bless you.